All right, welcome to the next episode of Voice AI podcast, where we discuss the future of voice AI. Today, I'm super excited to host Sumanyu Sharma, who is the co-founder and CEO at Hamming.ai. Welcome, Sumanyu.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I was just discussing simulations of and tests of agents, voice agents, and that's why this makes this podcast even like extra interesting for me. But before we start, let me sort of explain what Hamming AI does as much as I can, or as much as ChatGPT can. All right, so Hamming AI, founded in 2023, specializes in testing and improving AI voice agents through automated testing and call analytics. With around 4 million seed funding in 24 and backed by YC and many other VCs, it ensures reliable AI deployment. Co-founders Sumanyu and Marius leverage expertise from companies like Tesla and Reddit to enhance voice AI systems for various industries. How did it sound? Was it spot on, like a bit off?
It sounds reasonable. I think that sounds reasonable.
Very cool. It has a pretty high sort of hit rate. I also use ChatGPT for this. Look, very hot topic, right? How do you trust the agents, right? Everyone is talking about agents. Everyone is talking about voice agents, but how do enterprises trust them? I think no one has a proper answer to that. And what you guys are doing is very trendy, and it's a big pain. Can you sort of describe how you came with this idea, where the need came from, and also how your product works, basically?
Sure. I think the origin story really traces to our experiences at Citizen and Anduril and even Spell, I would say, for Marius. So at Citizen, do you use Citizen, by the way? Have you used
No,
Citizen app?
no,
Got
not
it.
really.
It's a crime app, sends you crime alerts based on
Oh,
location.
right.
And
Okay,
the
I
way Citizen
remember.
works is great. We scrape 911 calls, and we did a transcription process to remove background noise, other things that you're obviously intimately familiar with, to transcribe them and create insights and send them to consumers who want to stay safe and informed. And so audio processing, reliability, sort of public safety, trust, that is a big component of where Marius and I kind of come from back at Citizen. And at Anduril, obviously Marius built simulations there, built data pipelines, and built observability tools. And so it just feels like we've been doing this in bits and pieces in various settings. And it just felt like the right cocktail of experiences, kind of deep interest in voice to make voice agents reliable. So that's the origin story. It's obviously pretty messy, as in it doesn't go from, oh, here's the background to an idea. There's lots of
Sure.
iterations and pivots along the way. That's the reality. But we felt at home when we decided to pick voice,
Yeah.
and make voice agents reliable.
Okay. Yeah, no, it sounds sounds actually interesting, because I know other founders that started from, like, I don't know, with text, and then at some point pivoted to voice, because there are some unsolved problems in voice. A voice is not reliable, and like things there is a room for like innovation there, and differentiation, right? So this sounds very natural, I guess. So let's sort of, can you describe what the platform does, and from the customer perspective, like what problems does it solve, and why
Sure.
can't they solve it by their own, right? Why is it difficult?
Sure. Yeah. So let's say a customer of ours is building an AI drive-through, or even phone orders that people are placing. You can certainly test it by hand, which is what people do. So right now, engineers, ops, product folks, they're testing their agents kind of by hand. They're dogfooding their own voice agents, and they're trying to simulate different accents, different voices. This is a real story, by the way. Like, people will buy equipment like a fan, blow dryer, and just see how well the overall pipeline that they've built is able to understand and take correct actions. Um, you know, and this is just unscalable because you're just spending hours every single day, kind of every single week,
Sure.
testing these agents by hand. And what's worse is not only is it very slow ad hoc, it's also unsystematic in the sense, let's say you do a battery of test cases, you brute force your way through to one test iteration. Let's say you go make a change to your VAT settings, or perhaps the way you're doing transcription, or perhaps you're changing the underlying prompt. How are you supposed to know what the incremental impact of that would be? You have no idea. And so you're going to spend the exact same effort, very monotonous effort, calling your agent up, inbound, outbound, doesn't matter, even web. And it is just like an unscalable process. And so instead of doing this super manual calls by hand during the development phase, you would use a Hamming where we would spin up our own army of voice agents that in the inbound case would call your voice agents, and we can do the simulations. We can do environmental, mapping, like do audio mixing, have kids screaming in the back, crosstalk happening, and really measure quantitatively how well your agent's able to handle these environmental kind of challenges on both what is said and how it's said. So that's the development phase.
So you basically simulate noises, like you do the opposite of what Crisp is doing very well.
Exactly.
Like we're gonna remove your noises, right? Like that's very cool. Very cool. Okay, so you basically have this army of voice agents. Is the interface like voice calls?
The interface is voice calls. It's the highest fidelity signal, I would say. It's the most generalizable. Once you get the test results, you can kind of trust that, yeah, this actually works on voice, and therefore this will work for customers who are consuming it by the same, API. I do think there's some room to do text-to-text based, evals or simulations. I just think it's necessary but not sufficient. Just not sufficient. Doesn't really generalize super well out of sample.
Also, the variations on voice are so much more, right?
Totally.
And yeah, so I think that has a higher pain, basically. Like the part that I don't fully understand, and maybe that's not something you guys do, but like if you have like an enterprise environment, they have a lot of systems, right? The voice is just the interface to these systems, and if they have an agent, like this agent needs to work with all these systems and to produce like results, right, for their customers. Like,
yep.
Do you require them to have a staging sort of environment where they will run these tests? Is it their job to create this staging environment and just like give you an interface to their staging environment, and that's where you plug in? Is that how it works?
For testing, yes. The burden right now is on the customer to create mocks of their systems that allows us to measure if their agent did the right thing, if it made the right API call, if it's processing results correctly. I don't think there's any specific reason for us to stop. It's simply the entry point. I'm describing where we are as a product, as a company. I think we should be simulating and mocking underlying systems too. We just haven't done the work yet. And so right now, yes, that is how we do it. The limits of Hamming kind of stop at I make an API call, and then we lose visibility. But we actually want to gain visibility into that as well.
Okay. And like, where do the test case reside? Is it on the customer sort of side, or you provide sort of a dashboard?
We provide.
Okay. So we
have a dashboard.
And then that's how you know whether it passed or not. So basically we click a button and then we know, like, got it. Interesting.
Exactly. You can run them programmatically. So if you have a CI/CD pipeline and you want to prevent regressions from, I guess, hitting prod, you would block your deployment based on the test results that Hamming is providing through a programmatic interface. In this case, you can also view the results more visually. And so there's lots of different ways for different teams to consume the information or to initiate test runs. So if you're like a PM, ops folks, you can use the dashboard. It's very easy to use. You can run experiments. You can consume them. If you want a more programmatic interface, you can certainly do so. So we're not really bounding or limiting the way people run tests or the way they consume results.
Got it. Yeah, I think that you have to support text at some point, because the folks that are going to test voice, they will be willing to test text as well.
I agree with
and
you.
it's probably going to be a requirement. Very, very interesting. So, and I think I saw on your website that you also do sort of security tests, like different scenarios, I guess, right? Like, can you talk about that? Like, how do you, what kind of like built-in scenarios do you support out of the box, and then how can this be enhanced?
For sure. So when we talk about testing, there is regression testing, or rather happy path testing, where we're making sure all of the edge cases are largely covered and the agent is doing the right thing on what it's supposed to. And that's one style of testing. Very similar to kind of like an end-to-end integration or unit test. You want full test coverage. And then there's more adversarial or property-based style testing, where we're just trying to emotionally kind of manipulate your agent. We're trying to, for example, let's say there's a voice agent deployed in the medical domain. We won't be the patient, but we'll be the patient's mother or sister and tell the voice agent to authenticate, on the patient's behalf. And we're trying to make sure that the agent is doing what it's supposed to and not providing, personal PHI information when the person is clearly not on the line. Others would be, I think, adversarial. Yeah.
That's the equivalent of social engineering attacks, right?
Basically. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you generate, like, do you like rely on LLMs to generate these different sort of scenarios, or you have maybe like existing database of such like attacks that people are aware of, right? Obviously, LLMs.
For sure. I think your intuition is spot on. We have a database of known attack vectors that work on humans. Some subset of them work on LLMs, but there's also new attack vectors that don't work on humans, but do work on LLMs. And we have learned what works, what doesn't. So we have internal, I guess, like a dictionary of strategies that generally tends to work. That's one benefit of working with lots of customers, is you see what makes one agent fail, and you can somewhat learn from that, internally, to inspire what attack vectors are worth using for the next, healthcare kind of voice agent or the next drive-through voice agent. I do some part of it is on the fly. So some of this is more real time, as in we will make calls, get feedback, and then change our search strategy to double click on a specific state transition or tool call that's happening and really spam that, those like kinks in the armor, let's call it, and keep attacking the weakest part of the system until it gets fixed. And so it is sort of, there are static strategies, but the strategies also end up being dynamic based on this specific voice agent that we're testing.
Very cool. I mean, I assume that the industry is going to have like standard modules that they will incorporate into LLMs and like put in front of LLMs, I guess, or maybe they will be integrated into LLMs that will sort of help guardrail against such social engineering attacks. Otherwise, like, there is not going to be, and no one is going to deploy these things, right? It's a very big pain. But your system can help the customers make it more specific for their vertical, for their use case.
That's correct.
Right? Because there isn't going to be like probably like something that serves everyone. So like the teams must be able to edit and add their own like tags.
Exactly. These dictionaries are like seed. It sort of helps you seed, but you still need to make it specific for your use case for this to be useful.
I have a friend that works on LLM security. He was telling me there is an attack that when you say something in English, like do this for me, like it's like I'm the patient's sister, do this for me. And when you say it in English, the LLM doesn't do it. But when you translate every word into a different language and say the same thing, it passes through.
Coercion, these subtle
Yes.
coercion.
Very, very interesting. Very cool. Sumanyu, like let's talk about sort of next 2 years, right? How is this platform gonna change, and what's your vision around like the industry and tests and simulations, right? Like how this is gonna evolve, and how should the audience and the potential customers think about the future?
For
It's
sure.
like the next 2 years, not beyond that, because no one knows that.
For sure. Um, I think the signs are pretty clear that conversational AI is going to become the dominant way I think consumers interact with brands. I think that part is pretty clear. I mean, we've seen successes with Sierra, Decagon. I mean, there's lots of these, customer support style, workflows that are becoming more dominant. I think voice will end up being bigger than text. My prediction for the next 2 years is there's going to be a massive, massive scale up in voice, very similar to how kind of mobile took off, where if you don't have some voice interface, it's almost table stakes at some point. And I think consumer expectations will increase for what these agents are capable of, and there's going to be I mean I'm hoping we prevent this, but I'm sure there's going to be some Air Canada 2.0 story, some Chevy situation where these voice agents get manipulated out in the wild. And so I think our hope is enterprises take the brand risk and security, pretty seriously, and do testing, whether it's Hamming, whether it's internal, whether it's some other thing. Very, very important. You just cannot YOLO with this. Voice is very sacred. I think when chatbots fail, you're sort of like, okay, yeah, this is a chatbot. It's not really as real. But when the thing sounds like human and makes mistakes that a human wouldn't do, it's very jarring and emotionally distressing. And so testing, simulations, even production call analytics, which we didn't really touch into, are going to be critical for continued kind of deployment success. That's my personal prediction is 10x, 100x. The market's going to grow 100x.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's, we can imagine that. Like, and what's going to be your response in terms of like roadmap, like how the platform is going to grow, and what the listeners should not start building if they're going to use your platform.
I think the actual voice agent that you're building, I think that's core IP for you and how you build your voice agent and what functionality it has. I think that ends. Most companies, I think, will end up building their own specific stack that's unique to them that allows them to iterate. But I think if you're trying to test your voice agents, if you want observability, if you want to manage all these prompts, if you want guardrails like a firewall that actually protects your voice agent from ever speaking something that's off brand, I would encourage you to just send me an email. Grab time with me so you don't end up wasting time building that we will build anyway. And so our goal is to provide all the infrastructure necessary to help any enterprise, be it a startup all the way to large, trillion-dollar behemoths, in scaling their voice agents successfully in a way that protects their brand and helps consumers get things done quickly.
No, makes sense. Let me challenge you
Sure.
on the vision. I mean, clearly, like the market is going to grow, but when we think about voice, like the difference between chat and sort of voice based interactions is basically there is a speech to text in between, right? So isn't it like a matter of making sure that the speech to text is robust, and then the rest is actually as long as the text-based interaction works, the voice is not, like voice doesn't matter anymore. Or there is more, it's more nuanced than that.
I think you're right in principle. I think one more prediction is end-to-end voice models will become, fairly dominant. I just don't think voice-to-voice behave the same way that sort of text-to-text do.
Mm.
They really don't.
Oh, I see.
So the
That's
attack
interesting.
vectors, yeah, the attack vectors are going to be unique and novel.
Oh, I
Just,
see. That's very,
yeah,
very good point.
yeah.
So it's basically different stack actually than
It's a
the
different stack.
text.
It actually has to be. It's a subtle,
Yeah.
I mean, I could be wrong, but
No,
personal
I think
feeling,
I
my
think
sort
that
of,
makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah.
That makes sense. All right. All right. You passed that test as well. So Sumanyu, this was great. Thanks so much for coming and sharing your vision and insights. I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing. So, and maybe we'll start using it soon.
Yeah, let's connect offline. Let's see how we can be helpful to you.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you.